What is up, SEC Nation? It's your good buddy Jackson Johnson, and I have a Georgia writer for UGA Sports at On3/Rivals, the one and only himself, Harrison Reno, as we will be going over the keys to victory for the Bulldogs, the players to watch for, and much, much more, all right here on SEC at the Voice of College Football. Let me tell you something, you're going to be in for a wild ride. How you doing today, good buddy?
Good, my man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you reaching out. Really excited. I didn't know what the SEC championship was going to look like at the beginning of the year. I had a feeling you'd probably see one of these two teams in there. It's always the best bet. Really wasn't thinking they'd get in heading into last weekend, but they did nonetheless. As Kirby says, I guess they're hard to kill, especially when it comes to SEC championship predictions, because this is the second year in a row now where they've gotten in on like the last week of the season.
Oh man, like it's a wild ride throughout the whole SEC. Like, good grief. I mean, it was like everything was all decided on rivalry week. That was like the funny part right there.
Hey, it's good for the sport, good for the conference. You get a rematch between two teams that have met often. I'm sure there's probably other SEC fans, probably people listening to this that are like, man, can't take another Georgia Alabama matchup. And while I can get those sentiments, I can understand. At the same time, it's going to be a good football game. That's the one thing about this. I don't want to call it a rivalry because it's not a rivalry between these two teams. Georgia needs to get the better of Alabama a little bit more, but this will be a good game. If there's anything we've learned about this matchup over the years, it's been that it produces some really good games. Some of them all-time classics.
Honestly, I've always kind of felt like Bama Georgia was a rivalry in some way, shape, or form because it's like, teaching the Bulldogs how to behave. I mean, that's literally in the fight song. Although they could be talking about Georgia, they could be talking about Mississippi State, where it's like you got to be more specific on that, of course. But also, I keep looking back at some of the classic games like before Saban and Smart, and Kayla DeBoer, because I keep thinking about like 1965. Now that's a classic right there where Georgia won by 2-point conversion, and it was like the second year of the Vince Dooley era, and he got it all started in style, upsetting the defending national champion Alabama Crimson Tide. And there's 1962 where Joe Namath made his debut, just smacking the Bulldogs off face of the earth. I mean, man, I could go off on like these historical games, but that's another time for another day.
Well before both of our times.
Yep.
Both
Even before our parents' times, even.
Absolutely. Well, and then like you think about just going back a couple years, like the 2012 matchup. I think Aaron Murray told me one time, Georgia quarterback, every time he does a preview or appearance for a Georgia Alabama game, he gets asked about that 2012 game. So, I mean, heck, there's the 2007 matchup, 2000, I want to say 8 matchup. Like there's been a ton of matchups over the years, but of the last 10, Alabama's gotten the better of them. So,
Oh yeah. I mean, like the 2022 Natty, that's where like the one time Georgia's had the upper hand in the Kirby Smart era. Like, I swear it feels like Alabama is kryptonite for Georgia. And Georgia is kryptonite for Texas, and Oklahoma is kryptonite for Alabama.
and then you can even go a little bit further. Texas seemingly Texas A&M's kryptonite. So it's all a cycle. It's all a cycle these days, and fan bases will experience their own kryptonite and then get to be that for somebody else. So I can tell you from Georgia's perspective, I think Georgia fans are nice to be on the other side of this conversation in terms of versus Texas versus Tennessee versus Florida versus Auburn. A lot of teams right now, especially traditional rivals for them, that have taken a couple years. It's been a few years since either of them have beaten Georgia. I know the senior class has yet to lose to either of those teams.
Oh man, like it's gonna be fun to see what happens. But just like looking at the key players for those who haven't really tuned in for the 2025 Georgia season, like besides like Gunnar Stockton and Nate Frazier, who are the key guys that people need to look out for on offense and defense?
Well, I will start on a guy in terms of biggest note, because I think when people talked about this matchup this time back in like September, the week of the game, you were talking about Georgia's offensive line, and they were banged up. Juan Gaston, true freshman starting guard / tackle at the time, got hurt in I want to say the opener versus Marshall. You go look at Ernest Green, veteran right tackle, most experienced offensive lineman that Georgia has outside of Micah Morris. He's been banged up on and off. But this unit's really particularly healthy, aside from last weekend. For the first time all year, Jackson, they had started the same starting 5 offensive linemen in like 3 straight games all year. That was a couple weeks ago. And then you get to Atlanta. I guess you go to Atlanta and you lose your starting center, Drew Bobo. He's been ultra consistent this year, a new starter, one of the, I think, 4 new starters they had coming into the year. Obviously, that prompted some question marks in terms of what Georgia was going to look like up front after a down year last year, despite having 4 NFL linemen. Drew Bobo's not going to be there. He hurt his foot in that Georgia Tech game. He is out for that game, possibly for the season at this point, is the word on Drew Bobo. So he will not be there. In terms of who replaces him, it sounds like Malachi Tolliver will be the guy. He got reps for Charlotte, played a little bit in that game versus Georgia Tech. Rather new face, doesn't have a ton of experience. That's something to watch on both sides, even from a neutral part. How does Georgia's offensive line gel and play down a starter who's been there? He's been evergreen. Drew Bobo is the only starter, I believe, that hasn't missed a snap in terms of injuries until this weekend. Major note. But in terms of the guys who will be playing, look no further than any of these, I guess, tight ends. When Georgia's offense is at its best this year, they're getting the tight ends involved, and they got a couple. And I know I sound like a broken record probably, because whenever someone talks about Georgia's offense, they're probably talking about the tight end. But there is no Brock Bowers in this unit. Heck, there is no Darnell Washington. This is kind of a group by committee, and that's how they play. Oscar Delp has been, I would say, the most consistent and best player in this unit, whether it be in line as a blocker or out there as a receiver. Really good season for him. He's kind of heated up over the last few weeks. He's the leader of that group, been there the longest, the senior. But you'll also have Lawson Lucky, his partner in crime. Lawson's kind of been same deal. In line, spreads him out a little bit, gets active as a receiver. I think Lawson Lucky went into last week's game versus Georgia Tech as Georgia's leading receiver in touchdown passes or touchdown receptions. So both those guys are red zone threats. They get him the ball all over the field, integral part of Georgia's offense. And then in terms of a new name, Elias Williams.
Ooh.
I think he's 6'7", 260 pounds, like Darnell Washington type size, freak athlete. This is one of the best players in the state of Georgia last year. Now he's a true freshman. I don't know if there's over the last 5 weeks, I think aside from Georgia Tech, Georgia had thrown him a jump ball at least once a game. Threw one against Texas, threw one and hit one versus Mississippi State. One of the bigger plays of the game early in that game. If you're looking for players to watch, look out for the tight ends.
I'll be definitely looking out for those tight ends, like especially Elias Williams, like because mess with him, he'll chew you up like a chicken nugget.
He is. It's going to be exciting to watch him over these next few years. Know your young guy that playing as a freshman, even in a loaded room. He's already has 7 receptions on the year, 117 yards. That's the one thing. Georgia's receiver room, it's been mostly by committee outside of Zachariah Branch. Like you have Zachariah Branch with 68 receptions on the year, and then there's a drop-off. Then you get down to Colby Young, who's been out since the Ole Miss game, has 23. You get to 18, 16, 17, 23. Like there's a drop. Zachariah Branch is by far and away the clear number 1 on this football team in terms of out wide. But then outside of him, the football gets spread around.
Oh, no doubt about it. And just like looking at the guys on defense, like CJ Allen and Ellis Robinson the fourth, is there anybody we need to look out for besides those guys for those tuning in to the SEC title game?
I would say, obviously, CJ Allen, one thing I want to monitor with him is how many snaps he plays. He came in, hurt his knee in the win over Texas, missed the Charlotte game, and somehow, some way had a knee scope surgery procedure done. I think the week after the Texas game, like after the Charlotte or before the Charlotte game. Somehow he got back and he took the starting snaps with the defense. This is usually that type of procedure usually takes a couple weeks for you to come back. Like, it's insane. Kirby said he was wired different in terms of how he came back. Like, I obviously watch him and see how much he plays. He's been playing his best football this season, and it's no surprise. He's a Buckus Award finalist, somebody to watch. Obviously, the guy next to him, Raylan Wilson. Kirby Smart's been very lavish with plays on Raylan in terms of stepping up as a leader and almost adopting kind of CJ's role. So obviously those two guys, it starts with them in terms of Georgia's defense, especially in the front seven. But two guys who are kind of emerging, who one of them's kind of an older face who's been around, who's played in some games. One, and then the other is kind of like a new face, somebody who was on the roster but didn't really play much last year. And it's two edge rushers for Georgia, which has been a position of weakness. Gabe Harris and Quintavious Johnson, those two have been kind of emerging along this front seven, especially in the front four. Gabe Harris had a heck of a game last week against Georgia Tech. I believe he was in on the play, the opening tackle for a loss. I believe he even got a sack versus Georgia Tech last week. Super, super disruptive. This is another freaky athlete. This is a guy that is playing outside linebacker, which is traditional edge rusher in Georgia's offense. This guy's 6'4", 260 pounds. But last year, when Georgia needed him to play, this guy was lining up as a three tech, which is traditionally a defensive tackle role. And he, is facing off the guard that probably weighs 40 more pounds more than him. So this guy moves up and down Georgia's offensive line or defensive line. And it's because he's good pretty much wherever they put him. And now he's starting to show some of the twitchiness, some of the speed, some of the power that he showed coming out of high school. And he's starting to put it together, which is a really good sign for Georgia's edge group, because that's been a position that's been really, really lacking this year compared to years past. And then Quintavious Johnson, another guy, rather new face, was on Georgia's roster last year as a true freshman. Didn't play much, but now is thrown into that jack linebacker type spot, playing consistent downs, really good versus the run for Georgia, and started to put it together as a pass rusher. Those would be two guys in terms of who could prove the biggest difference in this game. It's what does Georgia's defensive line do versus that Alabama offensive line? Because if you remember, Ty Simpson had all the time in the world to get the ball out in that first matchup. And that's a direct byproduct of that defensive front. Maybe Georgia's defense as a whole not knowing its identity just quite yet.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Georgia defense. Because they're going to be rolling. They're going to be rocking. Especially you got Glenn Schumann as your DC. And, there's Bobo as your offense coordinator, which I'll be honest, I talked a lot of crap about Bobo as the offensive coordinator. So it's like,
welcome. There's plenty of Georgia fans that probably agree with much of your sentiment, but he's been, even to those who on the dog vent that have been ultra critical, never stop being critical. A lot of them are starting to acknowledge he's had a really good year.
Oh man. But just looking at Georgia, of course, and it's been tough for them to get a victory over Alabama. Because it's been close, but no cigar. Like that Weird Al Yankovic song where the Kid Cat's just singing about how he's close, but no cigar. But what are the keys to victory for Georgia?
I think for the most part, as cliche as it sounds, it's true. When you go look at where the Alabama game went wrong the last two times, it's third down, especially on the defensive side of the ball from Georgia's perspective. Georgia has not been able, especially in the early parts of these football games versus Alabama in the last two matchups, to get off the field on third down. There were several third and longs that they converted versus Georgia on the opening drive this year in Athens. And then even last year, Jalen Milroe and those guys diced Georgia up. I mean, Georgia was getting just outplayed for the first 30 minutes of football in both of the last two matchups. One was on the road, one was at home. It does not matter. Weird, freaky, scary second down song they played in Sanford did not matter. Third down song played by the band did not matter. Bama was getting, staying on the field and really kept the ball away from Georgia. So it starts right there in terms of Georgia has become a better unit defensively on third down over the last few weeks since they last played Alabama. I believe they were giving up at like a 40% clip at some point when they went into the Alabama game. And now you go look at it, they're playing much better, much more closer to I won't say they're not playing at the standard of Georgia defensively. That's still not the case, but they're closer to it. In the month of November, they're allowing 27.87% on third down conversion rate, which that's top 15 in the country. So a little bit closer to the Georgia standard on third down. When you compare that to August and November, Georgia was, hold on, doing this on air is probably not the best idea, but I didn't have these stats in front of me. They ranked 93rd, giving up 40% third down conversion clip. So they've gotten better. That's kind of where it starts for me on defense. The next part in terms of that, flipping over to the offensive side of the ball, is Gunnar Stockton needs to look like the quarterback that he did versus Texas and Ole Miss. In some really big spots, that man's came together, and he's played really well. I think Kirby said it best after the Florida game. He may not play well for all 4 quarters, but when you get to the third and fourth quarter, he's playing his best football when it matters most. And he gets better as the game goes on. I think notwithstanding last weekend versus Georgia Tech, which looked much more like the quarterback that Georgia had in those first 2 games versus Marshall and Austin Peay, and even in Alabama to an extent, there were some throws that obviously the interception Gunnar wants back. There was obviously, some other decisions where you have some, his eyes not being in the right place, or maybe his eyes are in the right place, but he doesn't rip the football. They need him to be the fourth quarter clutch guy that they had in those games versus Ole Miss and Texas. That's where this starts and ends for me. It's third down on defense. They have to get off the field, especially in the first half. They've played some of their worst first half games against Alabama last, even 3 times, because I think they got down in the SEC championship in 21 or 23. So they got to survive that first defensively. And then on the flip side, you got to figure out a way for your quarterback to play his best football game in the biggest of spots.
Well, and I can't help but feel like that Georgia, if they're stopped short on third down a bunch, they need to make sure they're in fourth and short a lot to make sure they can convert those fourth downs. Because that was what was key for Alabama against Auburn, where it's they couldn't quite get it on third down, but they were able to get it on fourth down.
And Georgia kind of took that mold in 2024 last year. There was a couple in those spots in that second half of that game. Georgia was playing with 4 downs. And I think Georgia went 4 for 4 on fourth down in that game. Converted, I think, 4 fourth downs on all 4 attempts. Really good stuff on fourth down, which helped them get him back into that football game. And I think you're right. And as maybe as shocking as it would be, I'm going to say this. And if it actually does happen, then maybe, I'm still might be surprised. But I won't be surprised to see Georgia come out and try and convert a fourth down early. Legit go for it early in this football game. Kirby's shown over the years, especially in these Texas matchups, he is a good judge of momentum and when to bring out, a surprise fake punt, or heck, even the ballsiest onside kick I've ever seen in that Texas game. He's really good at judging momentum in games and trying to flip it. Alabama's been the only matchup where he hasn't really been able to convert on those momentum flipping plays. I won't be shocked in the slightest if you see him early in this football game in the first half, them go for it on a 4th and 5 or 4th and 6, somewhere where it's hey, we're at midfield. We don't want to punt. Alabama's already scored. We got to get something out of this, and they go for it early. I wouldn't be shocked. He kind of pulled the rabbit out of the hat versus Texas last year in this game. Obviously, that was late fourth quarter, I want to say, with the fake punt. But I think he needs to come out and be aggressive in this game just because of how well Alabama's played in the first half of these games.
That is for sure. You definitely have to have aggressive play calling, but don't get too aggressive, but don't be too conservative either. You got to have a little mitts and mitts of both. Got to have that bate chocolate in order to get that victory in the 2025 SEC title game. That's for sure. Especially if you want to get that first round bye. But even if you're to lose, you're all right because you got a home game.
Yeah, and outside of Alabama, Georgia has not lost a home game since 19. South Carolina is the last one.
Well, we did well, besides Alabama this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's last time you lost to somebody that wasn't named Alabama at home was South Carolina 2019. That was at noon Eastern time, because I got to remember you're in Eastern time. I'm in Central time. So that was on ESPN, and I think that was October 19th of 2019.
One of the weirdest games I've seen them play. And it was kind of funny because it seemed like that same type of game was occurring in College Station
My
a few weeks
mistake. It was
ago.
October 12th.
I don't know how you pulled that date in the first place. I don't remember dates. I just remember the year and the opponent. So that was impressive nonetheless, even to be 7 days off. But yeah, it's just that South Carolina Georgia game was as weird as the College Station Texas A&M South Carolina game the other day or the other week, where A&M pulled off that massive comeback. But yeah, for Georgia, obviously,
Margot Robbie enjoying herself at the movie theater watching that game.
I mean, obviously for Georgia in terms of playoff implications, like this is legit. Hey, you win, you're a top 4 seed. You lose, you're a top 8 seed. You're hosting a playoff game. So the stakes aren't as high. Which for me, I've picked Georgia to win this matchup in September. I was wrong. I think I picked them last year to win on the road. I was wrong. I've reached the point where it's like I don't know if I can pick Georgia to win again. And especially in this matchup where Alabama comes in and all the implications for them are on the line. Like I don't think Alabama is in a you're in no matter what situation. I think there's possibly a case where you lose this game and you're on the outside looking into the playoffs or you're needing help elsewhere. So makes me lean out, especially given the history that Alabama's going to win this game. But there's no doubt in my mind that's going to be a good game. And I mean, I'm sure Georgia's going to have plenty of opportunities to slay the beast that's been under their bed for the last decade.
Yeah, I mean, like the Alabama Nation is kind of in mixed territory. Like some people are like, we have to win the SEC title game or it's nothing. Like I'm in that camp of Alabama's fine either way. Just don't let yourself get beat by 4 touchdowns or more. Which I mean, I don't think that's gonna happen. You're not gonna lose by double digits. I think Alabama's fine, but some Bama people, which I mean, I talked about this with Luke Robinson of Locked Alabama, which I mean, he and I both agree like Alabama's fine, but I know that some Alabama people are like, you gotta win this game or else we're done for. But I think if you're in the SEC title game or the Big Ten title game, you're not left out. I feel like if you're the Big 12 champ, it's the Big 12 or AC, you're screwed. And not how it should be, but unfortunately, that's the way the world works. But just don't be a 7-5 team in a conference title game. That's all I say.
Yeah, I'm really waiting to see what the precedent says in terms of this. This is kind of like the um, first year that I remember where it's like you have a team that's already on edge and they're getting in. I mean, Georgia was kind of in the same position last year, like which made the Georgia Tech coverage last year so interesting. Is I believe it was what's his name, Tessitore was saying like if Georgia had won,
Joe Tessitore, yeah.
yeah, just during the overtime of the Georgia Tech game was just like with a win here, Georgia's in the college football playoffs. I'm like, are they really though? Like you lose a third game in the SEC championship, are you really still in at that point? I wasn't quite so sure. I know they said that they wouldn't move. You wouldn't be punished for losing a conference championship, but I've yet to see it. I've also been told over the years, Jackson, that if you win the head-to-head matchup, you're going to be ranked above that team. So that precedent has seemingly been overridden in terms of the Notre Dame Miami debate. So I'm in a wait and see approach. I'm not going to be surprised if a 3-loss conference champion loser gets left out of the playoffs despite having to play that extra game. It would not shock me in the slightest because this committee's already shown they don't like precedents and they like reversing precedents.
Yeah, they're just pulling a Buds Bunny on all of us.
Absolutely.
But now we get to the point where we're going to the score predictions of this video. When looking at all the factors that you've been looking at, Harrison, what is your score prediction for the 2025 SEC title game?
Like I said, I think I'm predicting Bama to win because I can't be made a fool of 3 times in a row. There was a point in September where it's like, all right, if not now, then when for Georgia? And we're kind of back at that point of if not now, then when. But I'm not going to let myself do that. I think Bama wins this game. I think Bama needs it more. I think Bama has a lot of the elements that gives Georgia problems. Their defense has gotten way better since Georgia last faced them. I don't think Georgia's going to run for 200 yards in this game. I don't think Georgia's going to find itself in a hole quite like it did last September. I think this is going to be a closer game, but in the end, the Crimson Tide I think pulled this out. I'm going to go 28-24, 4-point win for Alabama. And I always want to have like a 3-point buffer in there because it feels like Georgia's always kicking field goals at least once in this game. So I have a 28-24 in the end here, and I don't know how the 4-point separation happens, but I think Bama goes 4 for 4 on touchdown drives, and Georgia has to settle for a field goal, and maybe that's the difference in this game at some point.
That's exactly my prediction for the ACC title game. Alabama 28-24. And as they say, great minds think alike because we've got great minds.
Georgia always seems to kick a field goal at some point in a game. Very rarely do I remember them going straight touchdown, 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 touchdown. So I have them kicking a field goal at least once, maybe twice, but we'll see. That's why I put that buffer in there. I think 24 is a nice, solid number in terms of where this game's at. And I get it. It's both in the 20s. So people will look at that and say, oh, that, neither defense probably played well, but I don't think this is a case where both sides are saying, hey, defense played awful. I think defenses are going to have plenty of stops in this game. I think you'll play decently. But in the end, it's just going to come down to Alabama scoring touchdowns and Georgia scoring field goals. And 7 points is better than 3 points. Simple math, simple football at the end of the day. But in terms of how that sets up for the future, you look at Alabama probably going to get a top 4 seed. I would assume the conference champion out of the SEC gets a top 4 seed, no matter the win-loss record in this circumstance. And then Georgia's probably, I don't know if Georgia would be the 5 seed or if they drop to the 7 seed. I'm not sure. I'm assuming the loser of the Big Ten title game will be the 5 seed just because of they've been ranked in the top 2 since Texas lost. So I think that's kind of how it shakes out.
There you go, man. It's going to be a wild ride going into Saturday, SEC title game, and there's all kinds of magic coming on here on SEC at the Voice College Football. And Harrison, what magic are you cooking up at UGA Sports, good buddy?
A lot of coverage over there. Appreciate you for having me. It is Jared Curtis News Day. The 5-star quarterback flipped to Vanderbilt, or reportedly flipped to Vanderbilt. He has come out and said that he doesn't know where that news came from, but seems pretty certain that he's going to end up in that Vanderbilt class. A lot of coverage of that. A lot of coverage over there at UJSports.com in terms of the SEC championship game. Looking forward to another one of these matchups. It was a great environment at Sanford. It's going to be an even better environment, I would imagine, in Mercedes-Benz. It's an open air press box, so you can actually hear the noise of the stadium. Mercedes-Benz does it so well. It's an amazing atmosphere. It's awesome, and can't wait to be there. Can't wait to experience it again. Was there last year for the Texas game. We'll be there again, just like I was last week for the Georgia Tech game. Mercedes-Benz is awesome. Hopefully, folks who can't make it get to enjoy the experience from the TV because it's going to be an electric atmosphere, especially between these two teams.
There you go, man. Tell your friends, your family, and the cashiers at Publix about the magic that Harrison brings on UGAsports.com @on3/rivals, where he brings out that magic all over the place. And give him a follow at Harrison Reno @Twitter and on Instagram and @HarrisonReno_. All right there. And you can check me out on Alabama at the Voice College Football, SEC at the Voice College Football, and you can check out my magic that I'm cooking on Jackson Johnson 979, where I host numerous episodes of the Jacksonian, where I've unveiled a new logo on there. That's all thanks to my good buddy, Mountaineer Paul at Lockdown, West Virginia. And for more updates, what I've got going on SEC at the Voice of College Football, Alabama at the Voice of College Football, the Jackson's World College Football with Mountaineer Paul and Lockdown, West Virginia. And once, twice week calls on the Paul Feinbaum Show, where the week gets full of surprises. Check me out, JatsBOCFB on /Twitter and on Instagram. There's JatsonJohns543-908. And with that being said, we wish y'all a happy day and to stay safe, stay warm. It's cold out. It is the month of December. And to like, comment, subscribe, click on the notification bell down below. Share the link of SEC at the Voice of College Football so you never miss no video whatsoever. And we will be seeing you soon. Good day, everybody.